Hi, I'm Nathan Halvorsen, and this is my term project for Indigenous Studies 100. I've chosen the Arawak people of South America and the Caribbean. In this presentation, you'll learn some background information as well as how they fit into society and where they are now in the world today, and some other information tucked in there as well. Hope you enjoy. The Arawak people of South America and the Caribbean. Pictured on the left is a map of South America and the countries in it. In the middle is a picture of Arawak people standing in front of a hut, which is also their house that they sleep in. And on the right is a map of the Caribbean. So why I chose these peoples? So I visited the country of Cuba, which is part of the Caribbean region, in April of 2018 to represent Canada in the sport of baseball. While there, I became fascinated with how much the people around this area care about their history and how they came to be. Down there, it's a completely different way of life than what we're used to here living in Canada. This was definitely a life-changing experience that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. So when I was forced to pick a region for this term project, it was an easy decision for me. So some general information about the Arawak people. They are a group of indigenous peoples of South America and the Caribbean. Arawak was applied by Europeans to people who self-identify as Arawak, Orako, or Lacano. Arawaks are also referred to as Taino, which translates to and means relatives. Arakan languages emerged in the Orinoco River Valley, and this language became the most extensive language family in South America at the time of European contact. Pictured in the top left is the Orinoco River Valley, where this language was originated, and pictured below that is a group of Arawak people in the river bathing, sharpening bow and arrows, and doing their daily rituals. So background information and history of the Arawak people. These people were the first native peoples encountered by Christopher Columbus on Hispaniola. Their religious belief was centered on a hierarchy of nature spirits and ancestors. Most of the population died from new illnesses, while many others were murdered or died defending their land. Arawaks lived in small communities, and each community had its own leader, which was referred to as a kaki. And the use of tobacco was commonly used for religious ceremonies with the Arawak people. Pictured here is a group of Arawak people doing one of many ceremonies that they had in their time. Continuing with background information and history, Arawaks were a very gentle culture. These peoples preferred negotiation and commercial exchange to war. For clothing, the men were generally naked, but the women sometimes wore short skirts. Men and women both adorned their bodies with paint and shells and other decorations they could find. In this photo here, you see two male Arawak peoples in their clothes for the day. Now this was their attire for the whole existence of these peoples. So how did the Arawak people fit into society and how did they operate? These particular people were agriculturists and practiced slash and burn cultivation of cassava and corn. These people shared the means of livelihood and social organization with other tribes of the tropical forest. Arawak people lived in small thatch huts since they were living in such a warm climate and slept in woven hammocks. Even with these people's social organization, they were not given warfare. This led to them being driven out of the Lesser Antilles by the Caribs shortly after the appearance of the Spanish. In this picture here, you see Arawak peoples of all different ages, sizes, and genders sporting their attire in front of the thatch hut in which they lived in. Continuing on with how they operate in society, society was characterized by happiness, friendliness, and a highly organized hierarchical paternal society with a lack of gil. Arawak people's diets consisted of the cassava crop, which is then baked into a bread-like slab. These people traveled by wooden canoes since horses and oxen were not available at that time. In this picture, you see a wooden canoe, which is how these people got around on a day-to-day basis without horses and oxen. So when looking at slavery of the Arawak peoples, this was not a hereditary slavery as in Old World culture. These peoples employed prisoners and in some cases other individuals. These particular prisoners had to perform services that were not expected of natural members of their communities. Forcing to obey was the initial stage of submission of strangers to the tribe. Newcomers, on the other hand, had to work so as to be eventually assimilated. Pictured here is not just Arawak people, but also some of the slaves that they had at their time. So where are the descendants of the Arawak people located in today's world? Well, a small number of them remain in South America. Most live in Guyana, where they represent 1/3 of the Indian population there. Smaller groups of these people can be found in Suriname, French Guiana, and Venezuela. The language of Arawak is now strictly only spoken by older adults. This particular characteristic signifies the soon-to-be death of their language and culture. On the left, you see how these peoples are represented in today's world and how their traditions continue to live on. So some other information about the Arawak people. Storytelling is very important to the Arawak Indian culture. In today's world, there are plenty of traditional Arawak legends and fairy tales to be told and heard. Arawak peoples were polytheists, and their gods were called Siamese or Zemi. The Arawak believed that there was an afterlife where the good would be rewarded and the bad would not be. These peoples defended themselves at their time using bow and arrows, some in which had poisons in the arrow tips. In this photo, you see Arawak people holding supplies that were necessary for them to survive. So why is the study of Arawak people and other peoples around the world important? Well, it's very important to learn and explore the different histories of different peoples and cultures around our world and expand our knowledge of them. It's very important to learn about and understand other people's backgrounds and cultures. Doing this, you get a better understanding of how some people came to be. You now have a better understanding of the history of a region of the world you probably wouldn't have looked deeper into if you weren't to study these. These people have changed how the history of our world is and how the world is currently today that we are living in. In this photo, you see an Arawak male sporting his decorations that were important to this culture. So my conclusion to wrap up this presentation about the Arawak people is hopefully you have a better understanding of who the Arawak people are and what they did for our society and world. The Arawak peoples are a unique group and have a very interesting backstory. Some aspects of the Arawak's way of life are still used in our modern society today. And although traces of these people will soon be completely wiped off the earth, their impact will always own a part of human and world history that will never be forgotten. In the last photo of this presentation, you see a tribute to the Taino and Arawak people in a tribute today. The men and women in this picture are dressed in almost the same exact clothing like they did as if they were in that time period. This represents how this culture has continued to play a part in our current society and how these peoples will continue to live on for the remainder of humanity. This concludes my presentation on the Arawak people of South America and the Caribbean. Hopefully you learned something about these pretty astonishing people and their culture. Thank you for watching and listening.